e lima, e ha, e kolu, e lua.
At night when the shadows are falling, I hear your rolling surf calling, calling and calling to me. Waikiki, 'tis for you that my heart is yearning. My thoughts are always...
In 1971, the Hawaii State Law Enforcement Officials Association, or HSLEOA, was founded. Since then, it has grown to become Hawaii's premier law enforcement organization. In this program, we'll take you back to Hawaii's early law enforcement days and explain how HSLEOA came to be.
In the pre-statehood years of the 1940s and 50s, Hawaii's law enforcement leaders faced a new challenge. Rapid change was coming to the islands, and controlling crime would take on new dimensions. Never again would Hawaii be the exotic South Sea paradise of songs, movies, and fantasies. Gone would be the years of unhurried days and peaceful nights, when a police officer's job dealt mostly with peacekeeping. World War II had shattered that life and that image, and ushered in people and events that projected disruptive changes for islanders and their lifestyles. Ships and planes brought increasing hordes of people who came, saw, and were conquered. Many of them stayed. Others followed in a seemingly endless stream of settlers. Houses, apartments, and new neighborhoods sprang up overnight. Cars, trucks, and buses, and the streets and highways to accommodate them, multiplied like rabbits. Business boomed. Gone forever, for better or for worse, was the quiet lifestyle of old Hawaii. With this flood of new people and outside influences came problems. Problems that made established law enforcement practices and operations outmoded and obsolete. Problems that strained law enforcement's resources and manpower. And problems that demanded attention and action if Hawaii's people, both Kama'aina and Malihini, were to be assured top-quality law enforcement. Gone forever were the days when the police chiefs of the four islands met socially and informally to talk story and prepare individual lobbying efforts for annual legislative sessions. With those days went the then prevailing philosophy that each island was in fact an island unto itself, and that each chief could and would decide on his own law enforcement problems. Slowly awakening was the realization that airplanes were uniting the islands in a way that war canoes and inter-island steamers had only promised. At the same time, the islands were becoming the final destination for more and more national and international visitors. Hawaii was earning the right to be known as the crossroads of the Pacific.
Hawaii's law enforcement leaders read the writing on the wall and began planning for the changes that would surely come. Police chiefs and commissioners, foreseeing the need for unity and a concerted law enforcement effort, initiated discussions on the subject. The November 1944 minutes of the Big Island Police Commission meeting, signed by Chairman Willis C. Jennings and Chief George Larson, Jr., contain one of the first known records that such a plan was afoot. Commission chairmen from all islands were meeting in Honolulu the following month to discuss suggestions to improve the police commission's setup in the territory and various matters affecting the commissions and police departments. The invitation for the meeting came from Honolulu Chairman George W. Sumner. Hawaii's law enforcement leaders had come to a meeting of the minds. The need for closer cooperation, better communications, setting common goals, and combining efforts were becoming more and more apparent. World War II ended, and peace brought on newer problems that demanded additional law enforcement attention. By now, the seed for law enforcement unity that had been planted under wartime conditions sprouted and began to grow as things began settling into a new post-war normal. This seed bore fruit on May 3rd and 4th of 1946 when the police chiefs and commissioners from all 4 islands met in Honolulu for the first territory-wide law enforcement conference. Honolulu Chief William Ho'opai served as host for this meeting. Big Island Assistant Chief Anthony Paul represented their department, while other would-be delegates were busy in the aftermath of the tidal wave that devastated downtown Hilo weeks earlier. From the minutes of the Big Island Commission meeting after the conference, Assistant Chief Paul reported that a major topic of discussion was a proposal to fingerprint every resident of the territory. This stemmed from Big Island Police having difficulty identifying tidal wave victims. Chief Paul noted that no action was taken on this proposal. Years passed before Hawaii's police chiefs and commissioners reconvened as a group, first on Kauai in 1950, then on the Big Island in 1951. At the top of their agendas were lobbying efforts for upcoming legislative sessions. Former chiefs Dan Liu of Honolulu, Anthony Paul of the Big Island, Gene R. Lane of Maui, and Edwin Corwell of Kauai were at the forefront of the territorial-wide enforcement movement. Conference teams and discussions ran the gamut of law enforcement problems and concerns: police standards and goals, equal pay, community relations, statehood, home rule, traffic codes and enforcement programs, police and the public they serve, and stricter laws and swifter justice. In the meantime, new leaders were at the helm of Hawaii's law enforcement community: Francis Kealo of Honolulu, Abraham Iona of Maui, Roy Hiram of Kauai, and Ernest Fergustrom of the Big Island.
With the 4 island commissions standing behind them and a growing roster of other local, state, and federal officials on the team, the annual Law Enforcement Conference had become an established forum for public debate on Hawaii's criminal justice issues. The 1970 HSLEOA Conference, held at Hilo's Naniloa Hotel, was a benchmark. The topic for that year was organized crime. Media coverage was heavy. The local syndicate had been under a media spotlight, and Hawaii's citizens clamored for answers and action. A gangster's car was blown up on a Honolulu street on the opening day of the conference. That brazen bombing punctuated the public's demand for law enforcement action. Conference delegates, more than 100 from all islands, heard the clamor and gave their reply. They prepared and adopted a list of 17 resolutions, all but one specifically aimed at organized crime. Many of those resolutions were the basis for laws that are now in the Hawaii Revised Statutes. Ultimately, that single standout resolution may prove to have been the conference's most important contribution to Hawaii's fight against crime and to the state's law enforcement community. That resolution noted that the state's law enforcement leaders had been meeting annually for 17 years as a loosely knit group of interested and dedicated officials who believed there was a need for a more permanent type of association. Delegates named the committee to develop that necessary organization. Maui Chief Abe Iona was named committee chairman. Iona went to work. 1 year later, at the 18th Annual Conference on Maui, delegates voted unanimously to organize themselves into the Hawaii State Law Enforcement Officials Association. The date was September 4th, 1971. Honolulu Chief Francis Keala was elected as the new association's first president. A constitution was adopted, bylaws were drafted, and a membership criteria established. By the next HSLEOA conference in 1972, 45 of Hawaii's law enforcement and criminal justice leaders had joined the fledgling association. The pace quickened and interest grew when delegates to the 1978 conference convened in Kona. The membership had more than doubled the charter list. There were 110 names on the membership roll. The association's annual conference, by now firmly established as Hawaii's premier law enforcement meeting, gained a stature and drew renowned speakers and panelists from around the state and the nation. Law enforcement, everybody's business, theme for the 1972 conference in Honolulu, had become the rallying cry for the fight against crime.
Beginning in 1982, one of the highlights of the conference was the selection of the association's Officer of the Year, chosen for outstanding accomplishments in the field of law enforcement. Candidates for the coveted statewide honor came from each of the 4 island police departments and the federal sector. HPD's Officer David Rodriguez holds the distinction of being the first Hawaii Officer of the Year. By the mid-1980s, new leaders had come into the picture and were guiding the 180-member association toward new goals. New challenges faced the state's law enforcement community, but by now firmly fixed in the public consciousness was the realization that success hinged on a united effort. Government leaders at all levels, business and professional men and women from all areas, community groups and associations, and above all, Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Public were needed to meet and overcome these challenges. The 1990s continued along these lines with newly appointed Honolulu Police Chief Michael S. Nakamura implementing a new philosophy into traditional law enforcement called community policing. The association has led the way for more than 2 decades. Its commitment to the future was solidly embedded in the membership's determined dedication to fight for the right with all its might.
Under its motto, Hui Kahi no Kapono, United for Justice, the association is poised and ready to assume an even greater leadership role in Hawaii's fight against crime.
Your involvement and continued support with this association will ensure a safer today and a better tomorrow for Hawaii. Aloha.
Ahuiho.